there's an article on CNN. Well, it's on the internet, but it's a CNN Money article, and you can see the headline there. The U.S. needs to borrow almost $300 billion this week. Well, daggone it. The article makes the point that China, who currently owns over $1 trillion in our debt, is looking at other options, which means the Chinese may or may not be interested in buying our debt. So they're kind of fear-mongering, trying to scare people. Okay, let me tell you why that article was complete stupidity. And let me tell you why, if the Chinese don't buy any of our debt for the rest of time, they never spend one more dime on our debt, it doesn't matter. We don't need the Chinese to buy our debt. Okay, the article is just, it's fear-mongering, and it's complete stupidity. All that happens is if the federal government sells $300 billion in debt and the marketplace comes in and say they buy up $290 billion, right? You know, all the banks and, you know, sovereign wealth funds, investors, all over the world, you know, domestic, abroad, whatever, they buy up almost all the debt. Not all of it, but almost all of it. 290 billion out of 300 billion. So there's 10 billion there that didn't get sold. All that happens is the Federal Reserve comes in and buys that debt. They print the money, and the $10 billion in assets go on the books of the Federal Reserve. And there's money there for the government to run on. It doesn't matter if we auction $300 billion and 290 billion show up, or 200 billion show up, or 100 billion show up, or zero show up. The Federal Reserve can come in and buy it up. The Federal Reserve has the authority to create as much money as they want. And I'm not suggesting that they go hog wild crazy with it, but the reality is interest rates are as low as they are. I mean, you've heard the expression, interest rates are artificial. And that's because if we didn't have a central bank, we lived in a world without a central bank, we put $300 billion up, and you sold, say, the 290 in debt, then you might have to raise interest rates a little bit to get that last 10 billion. And then on your next round, rates will be higher, and you might have to just keep raising rates to get your money. That's the way it works in a world without a central bank. That's why you have all the problems in the European Union. All these nations, Greece and Spain, all of them, they all sold off their central bank. So when they put their debt up for sale, they're at the mercy of the marketplace. They're at the mercy of supply and demand. The United States government, their debt offerings are not subject to supply and demand. It has nothing to do with supply and demand, because if the demand ain't there, they'll create their own demand. They'll create it out of thin air. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's done, you know, moderately. But, you know, generally the Federal Reserve doesn't have to step in, but you know, the assets on the books of the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve is almost all treasuries, or used to be. I mean, now it's more, you know, private assets, you know, mortgages and stuff. But it's fear mongering to say that if the Chinese aren't interested, we may not be able to sell all of our debt, and Trump's tax cuts might, present a problem. If nobody, it's like Jim Rogers said, which is complete propaganda. If nobody shows up at those debt auctions, you better head for the hills. So he's trying to sell his gold, trying to sell his gold and silver. He's just a shyster. You don't have to head for the hills if nobody shows up at a debt auction. You know, there's always somebody there that can buy it all up, and his name is the Fed. So it's all a bunch of hype, and it's just like as if you have a businessman who deals with banks year after year. He deals with 10 different banks, and they refinance them year in, year out over the decades, and say down the road, so many years, the banks are no longer interested. And his dad comes in and lends him the money. Well, his dad there is like the Federal Reserve. He's filling the gap. And the irony is Trump, when he was in his casinos were in trouble, his dad came in and bought $3 million in chips. He filled the gap. So Trump was like the government. His casino was like investors that didn't show up. And his dad was like the Federal Reserve.